Hey everyone, welcome into another episode of the Flyover League. Jamie Plunkett here with Noah Darling, as always, ready to break down another week of action across the Big 12. Noah, can you believe that we are through week 11 of the college baseball season? There are 3 weeks left of the regular season.
I was just telling you before, I can believe it, and I also can't believe it. It feels like we were just in Arlington for week one, and then it also feels like that was a lifetime ago at the same time. So many names that we now know who we maybe had never heard of heading into the season. That's the beauty of college baseball. And then so many guys that we're just ready to hand out awards to. So many postseason narratives on the line here as we have 3 weeks left. Eventful 3 weeks. I think the Big 12 does a good job of making sure that the storylines are still storylines and at the end of the year and nothing's decided yet, but things are starting to look clear at the top just a little bit.
Just a little bit. I mean, we're going to get into the Jayhawks and their weekend here in a moment. But it is interesting as we kind of just take a quick peek behind the curtain. I believe the two teams tied for second place in the conference play each other this weekend in Arizona State and UCF. And down the road later this month, the first and fourth place teams, Kansas and West Virginia, play each other. And then the final weekend of the regular season, the two teams tied for fourth, West Virginia and TCU, play each other. This upcoming weekend, TCU and Oklahoma State, who's sitting there in sixth place, play each other. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. The Big 12 does a phenomenal job of just understanding. It's almost like it's scripted, frankly. I wonder if they're getting their cues from the NFL as to how they need to play the scheduling game a little bit and just make sure that the outcomes happen the way that they want.
If it is scripted, they could do a little bit better of a job. I don't think anybody's that suspicious. You guys could maybe have a little bit less parity in the league. It's still not, every not everybody's a guaranteed sweep in terms of the bottom of the league. So that we could do better as far as rigging this league. Just ask the SEC. I'm sure that they know how to rig a thing or two.
Yeah, just ask Kentucky how their season or LSU how their seasons are going at this point. Shoot, put Tennessee on that list as well. But we're not an SEC podcast by any stretch of the imagination. We'll leave that up to some of the other fine folks over at College Baseball Central. Noah, we're going to get into all of the action from this weekend, but you've put something else at the top of the run sheet for us to start with this week, and I really do enjoy this type of conversation. We're getting to the point now in the season where all of the NCAA tournament projections and conversations are starting to happen. Bubble talk is really starting to bubble up to the surface, if you will. That was terrible. I might edit that out, actually. No, but we're starting to have a lot more bubble talk, a lot more conversation and chatter around who's actually going to be in the field of 64 when the tournament begins. And it's looking right now like the Big 12 is once again going to have a pretty strong appearance in the field. But why don't you go ahead and take the lead on this part of the conversation? What's your, when you think about NCAA tournament outlook right now, kind of what are the things that you're looking at?
Well, the number I've always thought of as top 50 RPI is the kind of arbitrary cutoff for really the conversation, and that leaves three teams. I'll get into kind of everybody's rankings that I laid out here. We as the Big 12 have 10 teams in the top 61. So the three teams that don't fall in the top 50 are number 57 Baylor. This is RPI. I don't know if I said that. Number 59 Kansas State and number 61 BYU. So according to the arbitrary number of the top 50, those are the three teams that they have some work to do as far as making the NCAA tournament, if that's their goal. I know that 11.7, our friends over there, said that K-State had a path to host a regional about a week ago. I thought that was kind of a crazy tweet at the time. It has aged only poorly after the Wildcats got swept by Kansas, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But either way, those are the three teams on the outside looking in of that arbitrary, again, top 50 RPI number. And then on the other side, you got 43 Arizona State. So that's a program that they slid down a little bit. They had those tough losses, that tough game against BYU. They've struggled in midweeks a little bit, including just last week. 41 TCU. That's a little bit Jekyll and Hyde there, Jamie. We will probably discuss that concept pretty heavily as the Horned Frogs are still very much in the Big 12 picture, just a game behind second place right now in the league, if you're really going to read into the tea leaves there. But still a sleeping giant. They're getting healthy. Number 41 in RPI TCU. Number 34, Oklahoma State in RPI. That's another Jekyll and Hyde team. They just won their first series on the road in conference play. this year. That's not necessarily something to be proud of, but it is an accomplishment for a team that struggled away from Stillwater. Number 27, and this is when we get into what you might consider to be maybe potential hosting conversation with number 27, West Virginia. Now, what's interesting about West Virginia is they had the same conference record as TCU, but you have a 14-point differential in RPI. We'll get into maybe what's wrong with RPI, what isn't. Nobody really knows what RPI is, feels like, so maybe that's a debate for another time. Then you have number 24, UCF, who has rattled off a few in a row here. They appear to be back after scuffling a little bit. Number 20, Cincinnati. And then number 12, Kansas. They made a big jump after sweeping K-State. I think they were in the 20s or maybe at 20 heading into the last weekend. And now they're they're safely in the hosting picture. If the tournament was revealed today, I think that they would safely be a host. But the question is, how will the next 3 weeks treat them? I think there's a conversation to be had that Kansas has the opportunity to maybe be that number 8 overall seed. But I don't know how all the numbers work. I never pretend to know what the committee thinks because I'm usually wrong when I try to do that. So that's how I laid it out, Jamie, on the run sheet you allude to. That's 10 teams in the top 61, but really 7 in the top 50 of RPI.
It's interesting you talk about Kansas at 12 and potentially being that kind of number 8 national seed. I think the general consensus at this point is that Kansas has moved from the are they good enough to host conversation into the fringe national seed conversation. I heard 11.7 talking about that earlier today. It feels like at this point, if Kansas takes care of business over the last 3 weekends of the season, they will undoubtedly host a regional. But the question will be, how good of a regional can they host? Can they be that national seed? Can they also get into the mix to host a super regional after that? And frankly, at this point, I think they're deserving of that number 8 national seed, just with the resume that they've put together, the wins that they have got collected. Oh my gosh, my dogs are going absolutely bananas outside. If a murderer comes on screen, just, tell my family I love them. But they've really started to shift away from just, oh my gosh, maybe the Big 12 will get a host, to maybe the Big 12 will get a national seed, which is something that has eluded this team over the last couple of weeks.
Of course, yeah.
Seasons,
and sure. That's really been the conversation the last year and a half now is, will the Big 12 get a host? And it spiked last year when there was no host. You thought TCU had a chance, maybe Arizona, who won the Big 12 tournament, had a chance. West Virginia was right in that conversation. You look at Kansas' schedule the rest of the way. You got Wichita State this week in midweek. If I were Kansas, I would find some bad weather. I don't know how that actually works in that process, but I would find a rain cloud and say, sorry, we can't do that one. If you're looking at manipulating RPI, then you host Arizona for a 3-game set. You go to Creighton. Now, would I advocate for maybe canceling Creighton if you're going to do the RPI game? Maybe, but I happen to live where Creighton resides, so I think they should play that one. And then I would say then you host West Virginia, a massive series for Big 12 implications and probably your best chance at boosting that RPI with their top 25 RPI that West Virginia has. You hope that continues to go up. If you're Kansas, if you're West Virginia, if you're everybody in the Big 12. And then they end the year with BYU. That's on the road, so that's a boost there if you really want to get in the metrics. And then you go to the Big 12 tournament. Now, the interesting side aspect of that Big 12 tournament is if you're the 1 seed and you're Kansas and you're saying, let's get the best resume we can, that's only 3 games. Now, that's still 3 games against good teams, but there might be other leagues where a top seed might play a 4th game. Maybe they play in a pool, whatever that looks like. The Big 10 has a weird format this year. Maybe UCLA, who's really not competing with Kansas in any regard, but UCLA, for example, might get another game to add to their resume. Not that they need it, but it just depends on how formats go and the Big 12 single elimination. How will that hurt you? You don't want to read too much into that, but Kansas has about, I think it was 13 opportunities left or somewhere in that ballpark to bolster that resume. And I think there's a chance that they can sneak into that top 8, but it'll be tough because there's always late movement in this thing. Don't count anybody out in the SEC because RPI generally favors those teams for whatever reason, better or for worse. Feels like an ACC team gets hot in the ACC tournament and always moves in that conversation. So it's going to get crowded quickly. But right now it looks good for Kansas to at least be in the conversation for the top 8 and definitely the top 16. I believe you're muted, Jamie.
And when we expand that conversation about the top 16 to include potentially more Big 12 teams than just the Kansas Jayhawks, I think it gets really interesting because there are a couple of resumes in the Big 12 that Maybe you could make the case could also be a regional host if things kind of break their way over the last 3 weeks of the season. I'm thinking specifically of Cincinnati, UCF, and West Virginia. Now, Cincinnati sitting right now with an under 500 Big 12 record at 10-11 feels a little perilous. The overall record is still really good, and they've got the RPI of 20, right? I mean, the RPI, for whatever reason, loves Cincinnati's non conference schedule, loves the strength that they've shown at various times this year, even though they have that kind of middling Big 12 record at this point. Now, if they continue to play like they have over the last 2 weeks, then they could very well play themselves right into that conversation. West Virginia has almost played themselves out of that conversation over the last week. And you compound that with the key injury to Max Yale and the questions about when he's going to be available, all that kind of stuff. I know the committee takes all that stuff into concern as well. Maybe they were another fringe host team 2 weeks ago that are kind of on the outside looking in. And then UCF, similar situation where 2 weeks ago, you're thinking, oh, they probably have just played themselves out of the potential to host. And then they go on the road and sweep this weekend and seem to have a relatively clear path to the end of the season. I mean, how many hosts do you really think we could be talking about when it comes to the Big 12? And do you think more hosts means fewer teams in that bubble, or vice versa?
That kind of is the political game of it, which is unfortunate. It seems that's the way it worked last year. We think is no hosts, but you got maybe an extra team in that Oklahoma State, Arizona State, maybe one of those guys don't make it if we repeat it and let TCU, Arizona host. I think West Virginia has an intriguing case down the road, but I think the max is two. And maybe if you want to get really political with it, all right, we'll give you Kansas as top eight, but that's all you're going to get. Who knows? This might all be a giant tinfoil hat, how conspiracy it gets, but I think the max is two for the Big 12. You look at the Big 10 is going to get at least two hosts this year. That's a factor. The SEC is down a little bit. You can chalk one up to the Sun Belt. I wrote a sort of a blog about this very off the cuff, not necessarily the smartest thing in the world, but it feels like there's only a handful of spots open for about 7 teams that are vying for those last spots in terms of the hosting bubble. That was as of a week ago. Now, again, I just said things will change. There'll be teams that will emerge. So I think that the safe number would be one to count on, which is still a huge upgrade over the zero that we counted on last year. But an outside shot at two with, again, those teams you mentioned, Cincinnati, UCF, and West Virginia being not only the favorites, but probably the only candidates at this point.
Well, let's go ahead and jump in and start to talk about the results from this weekend and how, we're taking a look at all of these teams because the resume at the end of the season will speak for itself or won't, depending on what the committee determines. But for now, let's focus on the baseball game at hand, the baseball being played currently, and two of these teams that we just talked about as potential kind of fringe host schools, high two seed schools, Cincinnati and West Virginia, just played each other at Cincinnati. The Bearcats take 2 of 3 in what was a pretty chaotic and wildly entertaining weekend of baseball between the Bearcats and the Mountaineers. Friday game goes 13 innings, drags over because of weather into Saturday afternoon. West Virginia takes that game 9-5, and then Cincinnati comes back and takes the next two. What were your big takeaways from Cincinnati, West Virginia?
Well, it was one that I had circled from the beginning of the season for a multitude of reasons. Both teams are fun, well coached, kind of play similar baseball. And then also just regionally, you think that's there are Northeast kind of representatives in the Big 12, and they're bound to have a little bit of a rivalry. You got the Bob Huggins aspect of things, just a fun matchup, and it was pretty fun overall. Like you said, it was topsy turvy, and then on Sunday, Cincinnati ended up coming all the way back and teaching West Virginia a lesson. I think West Virginia felt their lack of pitching depth this week just by being down one starter with Max Yale, and then you want to factor in maybe Chase Meyer, and maybe you felt his absence a little bit this weekend. But I don't want to credit a team too much for a guy that only threw one inning this year. So I won't overlook that, or I won't overread into that aspect of things. But Nate Taylor was really strong for Cincinnati, but then you saw Logan Knight go down for the Bearcats as well, and you wonder about their pitching depth. It was really a battle of which bullpen is going to crack first. And at the end, it ended up being West Virginia because it was Reese Bassinger who had thrown 75 pitches on Friday and then comes back into the game or into the series on Sunday. And you think, okay, what's the leverage we have here? And the Cincy offense was prepared for him. They I think hit 5 base hits in a row. Our buddy Enzo tied up the game, and then Cincinnati ended up pouring a few more on to go ahead and win it. And they shut the door in the ninth. I think it was like a 4-pitch ninth inning, just a really feeble effort at the plate from the Mountaineers to close it on Sunday. But overall, a really fun series. Jack Natilli had a big weekend, but it was really Nate Taylor on Friday who set the tone, even though West Virginia actually won that game with their weird rain delay where the commentators were saying it's going to start pouring any minute now. We need this game to end as we're in the 12th inning, and you're thinking, okay, is Cincinnati going to walk it off? But it's also monsooning. It's going to be very hard to hit the ball out. And then all of a sudden, all right, we'll see you guys tomorrow at Saturday afternoon. And I think that kind of won West Virginia that game. Just feels like the home team usually wins those kind of gross games in the middle of weather. Maybe that's just vibes of me, but either way, Cincinnati won the series, and it was very Bishop ball towards the end. Once they were able to scrape together base hits, small ball won the game, and it was a fun series. And you hope it doesn't define West Virginia too much, but they are on a skid, like you had said just a minute ago.
I think I was really impressed by Cincinnati's bullpen throughout the weekend. That was, I think, probably I would identify the bullpen as probably the weakest link for Cincinnati at this point in the year, just over what we've seen from the length of the season. But Adam Buxowski was great. Brennan Garula was fantastic on Sunday. Chad Brown. Like just a bunch of different guys stepped up in big moments for Cincinnati over the course of the weekend, and that was something that we hadn't quite seen them put all the way together yet. And this was a West Virginia lineup, like you've noted, that has had tremendous amounts of success against good pitching all year and couldn't figure it out this weekend at times. So if that's the kind of bullpen work we get from Cincinnati the rest of the year, I think they're in great shape. And I think that they're going to be hell in a regional for whoever has to face them, because we know what the starting pitching can do with Nate Taylor. Logan Knight has taken a huge step forward as well, but it's the bullpen. Like how can you handle late game situations? How can you handle those high leverage moments that at least for this weekend Cincinnati did really, really well. But enough about Cincinnati, and let's finish off just conversation about West Virginia here real quick. Noah, when you look at West Virginia as currently constructed, how concerned are you about the way we saw them play this weekend? Just obviously the injury is one thing, but overall the offense is struggling. Some questions about maybe some bullpen at this point. Just what are your thoughts on the Mountaineers?
I'm not as concerned as I probably should be in the amount of West Virginia stock I have. I'm going to put some stock into the concept that Max Yale going down screwed things up for their plan, at least on the mound. Corn going all the way on Friday, coming out of the bullpen, that worked for the most part, but it still messes things up everywhere else. You're now relying on guys and roles that you didn't think you'd rely on. That how does that impact the bullpen? Just mentioned Bassinger and now he had to be used a little bit more. You have Estridge coming out of maybe higher leverage situations than you would like. The rotation this weekend stood out to me: Corn, Cole, and then Montesa. So we were wondering when Montesa was going to skip down from the Friday roll. That was last week, and now he's 2 weeks in a row, I believe, now in the Sunday spot. And I was interested in the way that they used Chanson Cole. He essentially closed the game. He did get the win in that first game, but he was the guy after the rain delay. He came in and they treated that like a start. So you finish game one and then you roll it right into game two, which I thought was interesting, somewhat innovative, I want to say, because I don't know how many times that's been done, but also risky because you don't know what might happen in that first game, and maybe you got to take him out and then you lose your starter for game two. That something crazy would have to happen for that to be the case as the visiting team, but still a risky move. I respect it, and for the most part, it kind of worked out for them because they picked up the win and then they rolled it into a decent start on Saturday. But I'm not overly concerned. Probably not as much as I should be because West Virginia fans seem to be concerned, and I do respect their ball knowledge.
Well, West Virginia fans are always kind of teetering on the edge, I feel like one or two moments away from lighting the whole city on fire and just burning everything down.
or at least a couch on fire.
And I say that by the way with an extraordinary amount of love and respect for the Mountaineer fan base, who have been nothing but good to me every time I've shown up in Morgantown, regardless of what event was taking place. Phenomenal group of people. I think we said it last week. Eat shit pit. We won't talk about the pit game this year necessarily after what happened last week, but
What
ESP
pit game?
nonetheless.
I don't know what you're
Exactly.
talking about.
I think it got rained out. I think it got rained out. What didn't get rained out, and maybe a team that's showing a slightly different trajectory than West Virginia right now, is the team that's tied with West Virginia in the Big 12 standings. That's TCU. They go and sweep Houston this weekend in Fort Worth, and they get this huge piece of the puzzle back in Tommy Lepore, who pitches one inning on Sunday during their run rule win to cap off that weekend. I was there for all three of these games, but I would love to hear your take first on just your observations of TCU against Houston, two teams that are very much heading in different directions at this point.
Well, number one, with Tommy Lepore returning, the way he returned stood out to me. Number one, tweeting the Batman video, that has never gone wrong. You tweet a clip from The Dark Knight, it never goes wrong. Very much a pitcher thing. I think Jack Flaherty used to do that with the Cardinals all the time. So that riled me up, and that's exactly who Tommy Lepore is. That guy is, you can call him Tommy Cocaine Lepore. Not sure if he's ever dabbled with the substance, but he doesn't need to, because that guy's always jacked up. And I think maybe you had said that maybe he'd even dialed it back on the field a little bit, but that guy is an animal, and it was cool to see him come out of the bullpen. Hopefully never have to see that again, because that's an A1 starter right there. And if you're fortunate enough to be TCU right now, where things have not gone A+ all year long, but they seem to be going pretty well right now overall, at least as far as treading water goes. And the idea of combining, and there are a few pitchers I'm going to leave out here, Jamie, so I'll tee you up for those guys. But you get Zach James and Tommy Lepore in a rotation. That's a really good start. You get the Arkansas transfer, whose name is escaping me. Lance Davis. I knew it was Davis. I didn't want to guess the first name, but Lance Davis. Those three guys are playing really well right now. If we just pretend that Tommy Lepore's 2 innings is reflective of his last 2 months, that's a really strong 1-2-3. And as others have said on the Bird app, very low hanging fruit take. Not a team you want to see in a regional setting, and it helps when the offense is actually doing things as well, which was not a commodity as of that Arizona series a few weeks ago for TCU. Jack Bell, 2 homers, 7 RBIs. Brady Dallimore had 6 RBIs on Sunday. That adds length to a lineup that you know what you're going to get with Sawyer Strohsnyder. Noah Franco has a big bat. Jack Bell's experienced, but not always a huge contributor. Cole Kramer in the same vein. When guys like that are able to get going, that makes TCU all the more dangerous. Again, like people are saying, they're going to be a problem in a regional, but also, like you said, they're still right in the Big 12 picture. If Kansas slips up, TCU has a chance to, crazy enough, win this league in the regular season. Now, it will require a lot of help, but it helps when you can go play West Virginia to close things out. There's that outside chance. I think that if that does happen, or even if we get close to it, maybe a week from now, I'm going to have to pull up that clip where I first said it, and I'm going to say it every week now. They're waiting in the shadows. It's that team that they're that program that even if they lose a million games, somehow they're still hanging around. This was the nightmare scenario for TCU, and we're talking about a team who has as many conference wins and losses as West Virginia, who we also talk about maybe hosting. So that's just the level of the respect that TCU has earned in this league, and more so focusing on their series against Houston, looked themselves, which has not been a guaranteed commodity this season.
Yeah, you talk about the Frogs, and really, I think we're watching. We're witnessing kind of like a floor season, right? Where not much went right for the first 6 weeks of the season at all, in any way, shape, or form. Defensively, they were bad. Offensively, they were bad. Pitching, they were bad. Lost Lepore and a slew of other arms to injury. I think the biggest thing from this weekend for me, Houston was pretty significantly overmatched the whole weekend. But you mentioned Sawyer Strohsnyder. He recorded his first RBI in the month of April on Sunday, right? He had 3 doubles on the weekend, finally drove in a run for the first time since late March. He's been in a pretty significant slump over the last 3.5, 4 weeks, I would say. And now he's starting to ramp back up a little bit. Chase Brunson has just quietly put together another great season. Noah Franco and Lucas Franco did not play on Saturday or Sunday in this weekend.
Mm.
Both of those guys have been struggling at the plate. Preston Gamster has stepped in at shortstop and been masterful defensively, and he's been swinging a really good bat. He had a home run on Sunday in TCU's win and a couple other hits as well. And then DH, you mentioned Brady Dallimore. How do you not keep his bat in the lineup right now with what he's doing? He had two bases loaded, bases clearing doubles with two outs in the win on Sunday. And he's a great he's a great catcher behind the plate too. And so he has the double edged ability to catch or DH. He's learned a little bit about playing first base as well if you need him in that capacity, although Rob Liddington has taken a big step over the last few weeks. It is good to see TCU take care of business on a weekend where they had Houston at home, on a weekend where other teams were on the road, and you had an opportunity to make up a little bit of ground. Feels like the Frogs did that, especially when you consider the fact that West Virginia dropped the series. Obviously, UCF and Kansas sweeping didn't really help them out. Arizona State sweeping didn't really help them out, but they kept pace at the very least. And now we're starting to see a little bit of distance between that top third of the league and the rest of the league start to form. TCU on up, everybody's within 4 games, and then you get to Oklahoma State and BYU are the next 2 teams. They're 6 back, right? So there's a little bit of a gap there that's starting to form. When it comes to Houston, on the other side of all of this, it is as bad as it can possibly be, I think, for the Cougars right now. And I say that as a guy who really likes Todd Whitting. He was obviously at TCU prior to his time at Houston. Really good coach. I still feel that way. Really good man. I still feel that way. I don't know that Houston as an institution has invested in baseball in a manner that allows it to be very competitive there. You know, it's similar to me, Noah, to the conversation about Texas Tech, but also kind of polar opposite, where we see the investment in every other sport at Texas Tech and ask the question, why isn't it happening for baseball? And then we look at Houston and we see, you know, there's significant investment in men's basketball, but there's not a ton of investment anywhere else in that athletic department, really. And so you say, okay, well, where's the investment? But also, how invested is Houston really in athletics at all? And how much can a coach do when they, you know, I think, I don't know for sure, but I think how, you know, they have the smallest budget in the Big 12, right? So you can only do so much when your administration ties both your hands behind your back if you're Todd Whitting and that coaching staff. And yet,
It,
you know, we see guys like Trey Broussard, Blake Fields, Cade Climby, Richie Roman, right? They've got dudes that can compete. It's just not all fitting together.
it makes you wonder how prepared the institution was for the jump from the American to the Big 12 and what all goes into realignment when it happens from other schools' perspectives. When the Big 12 comes calling, you're not going to sit and say no as a lower tier conference member. So you wonder about the financials of that and what goes on to that. But I will say, even when you talk about Kelvin Sampson, and obviously that's a guy who played for a national championship 2 seasons ago, now in basketball, and has been to plenty of Final Fours along the way. Even he complains about some of the resources that he doesn't have at Houston. So every once in a while, if you listen to tea leaves, he'll even be upset. So if Kelvin Sampson, a national championship level head coach, is upset with the resources he's getting, what is Todd Whitting, who is let me pull up that actual record, 18-24 overall. What's his circumstance of resources look like? You feel sorry for the program itself, the players who want to be Houston Cougars, who want to win there. And if there is a changing of the guard, you hope that there's a change in the guard with the way that money is distributed towards the program as well. Because, like you compared it to Texas Tech, it's different entirely because every other program at Texas Tech is winning. Just softball, just last week, I think won a Big 12 championship, and you thought, why were there not $5 that could go over towards the baseball program to make a little bit leveling out happen? It's just a very strange situation there. But I like the comparison while also saying that they're extremely different.
And with Texas Tech fans will tell you off the rip too with softball, it's like, oh well, there's only one really big investor that's giving exclusively to softball, and that's why they're doing so well. And yet, sure, I guarantee you there are 5 or 6 folks with a good chunk of change in their bank account that would love to see baseball win more games, right?
Yep.
And so it's like, how do we activate that group of folks when we've been able to activate all the other givers on campus and around the alumni base? Uh, there are answers to those questions, and I'm sure Texas Tech's administration is looking into all of them at this point. Um, and we'll see how this offseason goes for both the Red Raiders and the Cougs. Let's keep rolling. Uh, let's talk about a little Sunflower Showdown. Your neck of the woods ish, Noah. Kansas goes on the road to Manhattan. It's within your driving range. It's within your 1 day driving range, I believe. Kansas goes on the road to Manhattan, beats Kansas State in Manhattan for the first time since 1963, I believe, or maybe sweeps them in Manhattan for the first time since 1963. To both push themselves further ahead in the Big 12 standings, expand their lead, and rocket Kansas State down towards the bottom of the standings. They are now in a 3-way tie for 9th at 9-12 in Big 12 play. We talked about it off the rip. I don't believe that their NCAA tournament hopes are as bright as maybe some of the projection models believe at this point, with an RPI in the low 50s and a record 3 games under 500 in Big 12 play. That's just me at this point, and maybe there's still enough time to turn the bus around for Kansas State. I'm not sure, but either way, this felt like a really defining moment for both Kansas and Kansas State this weekend.
It did, and you look at Kansas State, they sold out all 3 games, at least the first 2. I shouldn't say all 3, because the third game got all rain delayed and you didn't really see the full crowd, but those first 2 games were sold out, and the first game, Kansas came in and blew them out. I think they put up 9 runs in the first 2 innings and won by just about as many in 7 innings. And then on Saturday, it was your typical Kansas Jayhawk game where they play with their food a little bit per se. Maybe that's just part of the game plan. And then they come back. But then this time, K-State punched back. And then Kansas said, all right, now we're actually going to win the game. It was a very wild game. I'm sure we'll get into that in just a second. But looking at just K-State, their generational offense being wiped out by the opposite generational, maybe bullpen efforts, you can't really pinpoint specific performances because at times even their struggling bullpen arms have had really good outings. So it's not just can't use that guy. It's just inconsistency overall, and that's really, really frustrating from a K-State perspective. And they're not getting great defense behind their pitching either. Even D. Kennedy, who is now the single season home run leader at K-State with 18, and then he hit another one to make it 19 on Saturday. Even he has had defensive miscues as recently as this series. Their Kansas fans are calling him D-Error Kennedy, which is an unfortunate nickname for one of the best players in the league right now, probably in the country. And then that K-State offense, they were slugging home runs with Kansas. So it wasn't an offensive problem for the Wildcats, at least the first 2 days of this series. So just very similar to last season for K-State, where you wonder what their potential was based on how potent their offense is, but the pitching just lacks a little bit. And even then, Lincoln Sheffield was good on Saturday through 75 pitches and made it to the 7th inning. They got decent performances from even Cohen Feezer for a little while, the bullpen. So there's flashes there. But they just can't seem to put it together with both ends of the spectrum, because they did have that good weekend a few weeks ago. I believe it was against Utah, maybe, where they pitched really, really well, but the offense didn't show up that weekend. So very head-scratching season for Wildcat fans, and unfortunately, it's 2 years in a row of similar feelings.
Yeah, it's one of those situations with K-State where I feel like we may be seeing the injuries to the pitching staff catch up to them. I know Dante Lewis hasn't pitched in almost a month and a half. Carson Liggett has not been there for quite some time as well. But still, you're asking guys to maybe pitch in roles that they're not comfortable in. Cohen Feezer, I saw on Sunday, had thrown or maybe it was Saturday, had thrown 75 pitches or something like that, which is close to a career high for him, right? And so you're asking a lot of these guys who maybe haven't been in some of these situations before, and that's part of the game. That's part of college baseball, is finding out what your dudes are made of, but not at the end of April when you're trying to really solidify an NCAA tournament berth. So tough weekend for Kansas State. Great weekend for the Jayhawks. Like we talked about off the rip, I think they're in the national seed conversation now, at least on the fringe of it. And their schedule kind of opens up, right? West Virginia doesn't look nearly as threatening as it did maybe a month ago. And then Arizona and BYU, I believe, are the 2 teams that they close out the season with. So, If you're Kansas State, you got to stay laser focused, but at the same time, you can start to see the light at the end of the tunnel here.
Absolutely. And again, it's a repeat of last season where somebody's going to ask Pete Hughes about life on the bubble. He's going to get upset about it. And the reality is that you have to play your way off the bubble right now. And you hope that they're able to do it because when they're on, they can beat anybody in the country. And I do believe that. But when they're off, they are very susceptible to also being beaten by anybody in the country.
Yeah. So let's get into that Saturday game a little bit because it really did feel like a turning point, not only in the weekend, but potentially for the trajectory of both these teams through the rest of the season. Kansas State, first of all, it's not very frequently that they lose a game where D. Kennedy hits 2 home runs.
Yeah.
They scored 5 runs in the bottom of the 8th to take a lead, 8-5, I believe. And Kansas State just kind of shrugs its shoulder, or Kansas just kind of shrugs its shoulders and says, cool. And then here comes Brady Ballinger to do his thing. Big go-ahead 3-run home run. I believe it was Tyson Owens?
Tyson Owens. Yeah. Yep, Tyson Owens.
That hit the just like an exclamation point home run on top of that as well. Were you in Manhattan for this one, or were you there on Friday?
I was there on Saturday, so I was there for that crazy game, and it wasn't crazy for the first 7 innings. It was very pedestrian outside of D. Kennedy breaking a record and then putting an exclamation point on it himself. It was 3-2 heading into, or maybe even 3-1. I think it might have been 3-1 heading into the 8th inning. And you thought, okay, I think I'm going to lock in 3-2, Jamie. I think it was 3-2.
All right.
3-2 heading into the 8th inning. And you thought, all right, this is usually where Kansas pounces because Lincoln Sheffield had been very efficient. Like I said, had thrown maybe 75 pitches in the 7th. And all of a sudden they went to the bullpen. And you thought, if I've seen Kansas play the last 3 weeks, which Lord knows I have, their formula has been ride with the starter, take what you can get, and then as soon as the bullpen comes in, all right, we're gonna smack this guy right away. I don't know how you do that. I don't know how it's sustainable. That's great coaching. Maybe it's luck. Maybe it's both. I don't want to credit either the lucky charm guy or the head coach or discredit either one at the same time. But it's worked for Kansas. But the problem is K-State punched back. So Kansas rallies. They take the lead, and you think, oh, man, if they can just get 6 outs, this is going to be a great comeback. And then Kansas, with 2 outs themselves, rallies in the 8th inning. And they say, you know what? We're actually going to hit a home run now with Caden Carl hits a 3-run shot in his own right. And all of a sudden, K-State's leading, and then they keep teeing off. It's single, double this, and Kansas making errors in the outfield. So it wasn't just momentum shot and, all right, now let's go bad. It was momentum shot, and then you think, oh, this is how teams lose. Maybe you go down 1, and that's manageable, but then your defense struggles a little bit. Now all of a sudden you're down 2 or 3, and you think, all right, good win for K-State. They rode with the punches. Nobody else has been able to do that with Kansas. So turning point's a really good way to describe it because you thought this is how you beat Kansas. You let them beat you, and then you say, let's get lucky. And it wasn't even luck for K-State. They hit the ball really well. But in terms of the timing, let's scrape together these runs and let's go win the game. But then Kansas said, you know what? We actually don't really lose baseball games. And they went ahead and got the first few guys on base. And then Brady Ballinger goes opposite field, which is crazy for Ballinger, who it feels like his struggles have come when he pulls the ball. And what does he do? He lines an opposite field home run that you didn't think was going to get out. I don't think he thought it was going to get out. He was kind of trotting down the bases, but not in a home run way and like an I flew out kind of a way. And then it just got over the fence. And that was kind of the weekend for both teams. It was home run after home run. And it was just an unbelievable turn of events that if this was an NCAA tournament game or a College World Series game, it would be one of the greatest of all time. It feels like we say that every week in the Big 12 where there's just crazy game after crazy game. A lot of credit is to Big 12 bullpens, maybe even college bullpens, but very, very fun game that, like you said, defines both of those teams and also turn the table of the series.
How did the K-State runs this state sign holder respond in that 9th inning? How is he holding up?
He did not move. That guy remains motionless. There was a picture that was distributed last year after Kansas swept them in Lawrence of him holding his ripped up sign. Now, I'm not going to assume that he ripped up his own sign. I won't accuse anybody of malarkey, but I'm going to guess that he got some poor treatment last year leaving Lawrence. Seems like he was able to walk out by himself this year, but it was funny. I found the picture, or somebody had pointed out the picture to me. I remember this guy last year. Oh, yeah. And then I kind of look around the stadium and go, there he is. And then that was right when Kansas rallied. So maybe I'm partially to blame for me taking a picture of this guy generally ties to Kansas winning games against the Wildcats. I'll take Venmos or care packages, however Kansas wants to distribute that.
I'm sure Fitz will get right on that for you and send you a big old box of goodies and whatnot. And it's very clear that this K State fan he's operates best in the shadows when he's unseen and
Yeah.
unnoticed. So
I
way
don't, I
to
don't know how
expose him.
familiar you are with him, Jamie. This K State fan, I've learned a little bit since I first disrespected him. I just took a picture of the guy. But apparently he travels all over for K State events. He will go every away game of every sport. He will be at every location. So when K State comes to Fort Worth next season or however many years down the road it's going to be with not everybody playing everybody anymore, keep your eye out because he'll be there supposedly.
Look, this sounds like a man we desperately need to get on the Flyover League for an interview.
I agree.
This,
He
this
doesn't strike me as the type to have great internet service, but I do agree.
Okay. Well, maybe he can borrow your hotspot. They can come sit right next to you or something. I don't know. Man, let's keep on rolling here and let's head up to Salt Lake City where, you know, it was just this time last week, Noah, where I made the declarative statement that I was no longer going to pick against Utah at home in the pick'em. And I did not pick against Utah at home this week. And I, along with the Utes, got it absolutely handed to me on a silver platter by UCF, who goes in, outscores Utah 34-6, and sweeps them out of their own ballpark. It's their first series loss in their new ballpark up there in Salt Lake City. It is, we talked about the defining moment for Kansas and Kansas State. Now we're going to get to see kind of what the Utes have as far as grit is concerned moving forward after, taking it on the chin like that at home. But really, I think the biggest takeaway is, okay, UCF kind of took their lumps over the last 2 weeks, licked their wounds, and now they've reminded folks, hey, no, we're legitimate. We're a legitimate contender in this league.
Yeah, we kind of forgot about UCF. I don't want to lump you in with we, but I'll say I forgot about UCF and how good they can be. They go out and struggle a little bit, and then you think, okay, they flew too close to the sun. Now they'll drift back to where maybe we had projected them, maybe not all the way down, but somewhere in between. Impressive series because, like you had said, nobody goes into Utah and wins, at least in this new stadium. And JD Rogers got the party started on Friday. That guy had a huge midweek performance, if I'm remembering correctly, and then 2 home runs, 7 RBIs just on Friday. One was a grand slam, if I'm remembering correctly. Mateo Gray was quality on the mound as well. So they go in there and they win on Friday. They run rule on Friday. And then you get the Saturday, Sunday doubleheader, which is always scary for visiting teams or even teams who crossed however many time zones it is with daylight savings time. You pointed out that stat about Arizona having like 3 different time zones, whatever it was, however many you had to cross to get to Arizona right now. And it really freaked me out about time zones. But however many it is to get to Salt Lake for UCF, it is however many they crossed. And it didn't seem to bother him. Cam Wicker, co-Big 12 pitcher of the week with his performance on Saturday. That was another run rule victory for the Knights. 7 innings pitched, 2 hits, 5 strikeouts. But John Smith was massive as well. And it feels like we keep calling his name the last few weeks. He added 3 more home runs to his repertoire, all on Saturday in that doubleheader. 7 RBI for him as well. It feels like UCF kind of made a statement a little bit, even when we weren't expecting it, because it's Utah at home. You can chalk them up to win 2 out of 3, even though they maybe struggle everywhere else. And we've accused Utah of being dead a few times now, and they seem to come back to life. So maybe this is what they needed was for the Flyover League to say, all right, Utah, you're done now. But UCF brought back to life all of a sudden. And now who knows what they might be able to do as the last 3 weeks of this season come to an end.
Look, I mean, if you're thinking about UCF right now, if you're a UCF fan, you say, hey, there's still plenty of time to get back into this hosting conversation, right? If you take care of business these next 3 weeks, go 7-2, take care of your midweek if they still have 1 or 2 left. I'm not sure. I know they've got one this week. Then yeah, I mean, you could be right in the mix for that conversation. Like you said, it's a pretty crowded field right now on that hosting bubble. But if things sort themselves out and break your way, I could see a path for UCF to being a regional host this year, which I think would put them maybe ahead of schedule based on where we thought they would be at the beginning of the year in year 3 under Rich Wallace. But yeah, no, I thought it was a great weekend for the Knights. For Utah, the thing has been okay, well, they're going to at least score runs. They're going to at least be hard to beat because of their offense. And that just, it was virtually non existent this year. I mean, they just, all three of these games, it just felt like UCF kind of clubbed them to death and they had nothing going for them.
Yeah, I felt like UCF ran away. Two run rule victories for the Knights. That's hard to do as a visiting team, is to run rule the other team, it feels like. And just a almost a no-show from Utah, which was disappointing, but we felt like it might have been overdue with the Coulter suspension. They get him back, and this is when you kind of disappear a little bit. Just a weird deal. But Utah, I believe they have TCU coming up. Is that correct this week, Jamie?
TCU is at Oklahoma State this week, and then
You're
next
right. You're right.
weekend Utah will be down in Fort Worth. Yes,
That's when they'll bounce back. Then
come on. Okay, well, maybe. You never know. Look, I think we're not going to get into that right now. I'm not going to be drawn off sides by that. Absolutely not. I do like Utah still. I think when you look at Utah's overall record, and I wrote about this over at Base 12 earlier, they have. Let me see. Let me double check, make sure. Yeah, they're 9-12, right? I mean, they already have more wins in Big 12 play than they did last year. That's a great step in the right direction. I think we've seen a lot of life from that program, not only on the baseball field, but just the energy around the program seems to be going in the right direction. And so, no, there's typically not this like astronomical leap forward for a school that has been, for lack of a better term, a basement dweller for the last, quite some time. But there's energy, there's investment, and it's clearly paying off for Utah despite the fact that they just got swept at home this weekend. So I still have I'm not selling any of my Utah stock quite yet. I don't know if they're at home this weekend, but I am a little leery, depending on who they play, about whether or not I will actually abide by my declaration I made last week moving forward.
Well, think about where Utah is, Jamie, if I may. If I had told you come the first week of May that they'll have the same record in Big 12 play as K-State and Baylor, you would say, oh my God, Utah is going to be doing great things this season. And then I would add and say they're one game behind Cincinnati. And then they're also one game behind, or 2 games behind Oklahoma State. You would say, oh my God, let's talk about the Utes more. So this is far from disappointment for Utah. Testament to how deep the Big 12 is as well, but absolutely moving in the right direction. A lot of positive momentum. They didn't make the Big 12 tournament last season. That still could happen. They could still slip up a little, but Houston and Texas Tech are certainly separating themselves in that regard. But a step in the right direction for sure. So let's not lose step of that when we're talking about UCF stepping forward as well. Utah's doing it, just maybe not as loud as UCF did this weekend.
Absolutely. And to that note, if I had posed to you before the season began the buy or sell question of both teams from the state of Utah will make the Big 12 tournament this year, what would you have bought that, or would you have sold that?
I'd have to consult my rankings. I think I would have sold it, truthfully, but I liked BYU more than I liked Utah heading into the year, so that makes me think I would have bought that. But still, I couldn't have seen it coming because I thought that for sure it'd be one or the other.
Yeah. So Utah's in good shape. Utah is on the right direction, on the right path. You mentioned the time zones in Arizona earlier. They are currently West Coast time, which means that the Baylor Bears had to travel across 2 time zones to Tempe this weekend. And unlike UCF, the Bears did not handle the time change well. They did not handle Arizona State's pitching very well. They did not handle Arizona State's hitting very well at times, as Arizona State sweeps the Bears. Not a great last couple of weekends for Baylor, frankly. They're 1-5 in their last 6 Big 12 games now. Very much on the outside looking in of the NCAA tournament bubble, down in that tie for 9th place that you just mentioned with Kansas State and Utah. But Arizona State, this is such an interesting ball club because they've now won 6, I believe, or 5 of their 7 Big 12 series. And outside of Landon Hairston, nationally, it does not seem like this team is being talked about a ton because they've hit a couple speed bumps of late. This was not a speed bump for them at all. They looked dominant pretty much the whole weekend.
It's a shame what RPI has done to the Arizona State Sun Devils. So much conversation. It was a few weeks ago when people were saying Willie Bloomquist might lose his job. The Arizona State Sun Devils are going to miss the tournament. And in theory, those things could still happen. When RPI does not appear to be in their favor, who knows how the next 3 weeks might go. But much in the conversation of TCU, and even more so, I would argue, who on earth would sign up to see Arizona State as the 2 seed in their region? No, nobody. This offense is wildly explosive. Baylor got a large mouthful of that. You have Cole Carlone going 11 strikeouts and 6 innings pitched on Friday. It's good to see him pitching back on schedule. He never left schedule, but ASU's played on a few Thursdays. It's good to see them back on Friday where they belong. And Arizona State just did exactly what they should be doing and smothered a team with offense. Everybody got it in the mix. Dean Toigo, Austin Rolig, the Utah transfer, had a big weekend. Beckett, Zavorek, Brody Briggs, and PJ Motsaritas. I think that's the closest I've gotten to saying that correctly.
Nailed it.
All contributed. It wasn't a huge week for Landon Hairston, who still got his, absolutely, a couple of RBIs here and there, but not a massive week for the, I would still say, Golden Spikes favorite, making it even more juicy of a fear factor if you're a 1 seed welcoming Arizona State to your regional. If RPI wasn't where it was, I would say that Arizona State should absolutely be in the hosting conversation, but whatever decides RPI, whatever that is that's holding them back is really, really upsetting for the Devils. But that's one of the scarier teams in the country. I declared that they'd won the Big 12 a few weeks ago. Maybe they still have a chance, Jamie. I don't think so, but maybe they do. And just ask Baylor. They got a teeth full of Arizona State this weekend. And again, the problem with Baylor is we look at the Bears, and if you stop their major guys, and even Arizona State didn't do a great job of stopping their big three, if you contain them, you can absolutely beat Baylor, and that continues to be a thorn in their side.
Yeah. So outside of Tice Armstrong, if you exclude him from Baylor's lineup this weekend, the Bears went hit with a batting average of 121. So realistically, just not going to get it done. Tice Armstrong did have a couple of home runs on Sunday to make it competitive for a brief moment until Arizona State pulled away. Travis Sanders went 3 for 4 on Friday and then only had 1 hit over the next 2 games. Brady Janusek had a home run and then was really quiet the next 2 days, right? It's just, I mean, I feel like we have the same conversation about Baylor almost every week where we just know very clearly who this ball club is right now. And we know what it takes to kind of stifle them and throttle them a little bit. And at the same time, Lucas Davenport went 6 innings on Friday. Zach Wallace was great on Saturday, 5 2/3. Ethan Calder did his thing for the most part until the latter innings of his outing on Sunday. Like, the pieces are still there. It's just, we're still waiting. We're still waiting for Baylor to take the next step. And like I've said a couple times now, 2027 is probably the year to really expect that next step. As we had the chance to sit down with Mitch Thompson a couple weekends ago now, he talked about roster building and maybe not quite being where he wants to be with the roster yet. I think that's pretty evident on a weekend like this one, and even a weekend like last one for Baylor, where you just wanted them to be a little bit more competitive at times and close things out a little bit better. And if they can start doing that either at the end of this season or moving into 2027, I think we're going to see Baylor start to get back to the Baylor of old.
And even looking towards the future, and I'm as big of a believer in Baylor as anybody. Brady Janusek, you hope you can keep him on. That's the reality of college baseball. Is every year is free agency. Not even college baseball, college sports. Maybe not even college baseball. Maybe college baseball is the safest one, but in college sports these days, it's recruiting your own guys sometimes, and who knows what Brady might hear, whether he's in the portal or not. You look at Travis Sanders. That's a redshirt junior, a guy that is certainly going to be looking at pro ball. He theoretically could come back, but that's usually a guy that you see go pro. And then Tice Armstrong, I think, is a graduate student. So those are 3 guys that you got to hope you can keep one of them, with Janusek being the favorite. Maybe you get Travis Sanders back, maybe. And then you've got to rebuild the rest of your roster. JJ Kennett is a nice piece. He's played well at times. You heard Mitch Thompson mention Dylan Perez. I don't know how old he is. Cade Dodson is a player I like somewhere down that roster. So there's pieces he can develop with a little bit of years left, but it's still going to be reloading a little bit. It's not full on welcome everybody back and do it again next year. So at some point, you have to get everybody right at the same time. And you wish you could put the pieces together where you say, let's take last year's team and combine them with a few guys from this year's team, and then you're really good. But you just got to get it right at once, and that starts a cycle a little bit. If Mitch Thompson continues to wish to build, let's build up, 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 and then have our big year and then rebuild. If that's how he wants to do it, it feels like next year could be the year, but maybe it's 2 years away.
Yeah, and the big factor there too is investment. It feels like Baylor's starting to see some investment around the program as well. Obviously, the big gift towards the stadium from Chip and Joanna Gaines, the new athletic director, seems to be really invested in baseball and interested in getting that sport back to its heyday. Um, but you're absolutely right. Like roster building these days, you don't see as much of the 3 year cycle. And if Baylor is still operating on a 3 year cycle, I just wonder how challenging that can be for a team, moving forward. Like retention is so challenging these days. How much can you just hope that you're going to hang on to guys? Last weekend series to cover here. Another one that was interesting and down to the wire a little bit. BYU and Arizona. Arizona snipes BYU in that first game, gets a win, and then the Cougars come back and take care of business the next 2 days. Really interesting weekend for both of these teams. You have we've been talking all year that Arizona's pitching is still really good, especially the starters. I don't think we maybe anticipated that Luke Flotta would end up as the Friday guy at one point or another, or the Thursday guy, I suppose. But he goes 6 innings, strikes out almost 7 innings, strikes out 11, shutout. Just absolute stellar performance from the Tulane transfer. And then you get pretty good outings the next 2 days, but it's just not enough because this offense can't really generate anything consistently.
Yeah, co-Big 12 pitcher of the week for Mr. Flotta there. And then you have Owen Krimkowski, who I would argue has actually improved over the year has gone. Not that he was in a rough spot heading into the year, but that's a guy that got roughed up early on, and he was all right against BYU. And then it was Smith Bailey who had his worst start in a brief period of time. So you thought that those three guys were actually stringing together some positive momentum, and BYU said, actually, we're kind of for real right now. You talk about programs moving in the right direction. A lot of us picked BYU in the pick'em. Jamie, I assume you were on the Cougars this week.
I was.
You were.
Yes.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Ryder Robinson, nice player. Easton Jones feels like we've been saying it for a few weeks now. He has a big moment every week. He had another one of those big moments. I like the way that the BYU pitching staff has kind of figured out their puzzle a little bit, because early on we said, you got Ashton Johnson, who's kind of your Swiss Army knife. How do you use him? Because once you use him once, they're going to keep him in for a couple innings at minimum, and then he's kind of spent for the whole weekend. He's not your traditional reliever. He's essentially a second starter you threw out there. And they were able to keep him until Saturday, the third game of the series, and that allowed them to really coast. When you get a quality start in there long enough, you can go to Ashton Johnson, Nate Gray on Sunday, and really feel comfortable in winning. And that might be a great recipe for winning the rest of the way for BYU. If you talk about a program that's ahead of schedule, I think that Coach Pratt has an argument to win Big 12 Coach of the Year. It probably won't happen because they usually give that to a coach who competes in the really near the top of the league. It'll probably be Dan Fitzgerald, Steve Saban, somebody in that realm. But Pratt has done an unbelievable job in turning that program around, especially in conference play, because it wasn't like they were rolling through non-conference play and you thought, oh man, look out for BYU. They've really strung it together against teams as their schedule has gotten tougher. It started with that Cincinnati schedule earlier in the year, and Arizona's not the greatest team in the world, but this is still BYU, who we projected to finish deep in the bottom half of the league, maybe even miss the Big 12 tournament. But they've impressed, and you got to tip your hat to these guys, especially losing on Thursday to start the series. This could have been a chance for them to roll over and say, all right, Arizona, you got us. But that's not what happened, and it's good for BYU.
It is good for BYU. This weekend was also good for Arizona, and here's why. They won on Friday. And that win, along with a team we're going to talk about next, losing all 3 games, moves Arizona into 12th in the league, which is the final spot that qualifies for the Big 12 tournament. When I had the chance to talk to Chip Hale a couple weeks ago when Arizona was in town in Fort Worth playing TCU, he said, right now, like with the team the way it is, how young it is, how hard it is, to see these guys continue to fight and potentially have a chance to at least get to surprise and play in the Big 12 tournament. That's really kind of what we're fighting for right now. And as of today, they'd be in the field, and that field just happens to be, an hour and a half, 2 hours from home and way closer for a lot of their fan base. So, I'm not counting out Arizona in any stretch quite yet, just because I think they have the talent, especially on the mound and the starter perspective, and with Garrett Hicks in that closer role now, to go and snipe a team or two come Big 12 tournament play. And no, that's not going to get them to a point where, oh, they're going to be the last at large bid in the NCAA tournament or anything like that. They'd have to win the Big 12 tournament in order to qualify. But they can mess with the Big 12 bubble a little bit if they're the right seed at the right moment that week, to either help or hurt the Big 12 when it comes to teams making it in the field. So keep an eye on the Wildcats, because they might be down and out at this point, but they can still make some noise in a couple of different ways.
Well, those Wildcats head to Lawrence. So you want to talk about a great chance to play spoiler? Is you're heading to the number one team in the Big 12 with a multi-game lead. What a chance that the Wildcats have to send a statement that they keep saying they're a young team. No better way to be thrown to the fire than seeing the Kansas crowd against a team who feels like they can't lose games. Huge opportunity for the Wildcats to continue to preserve their path to the Big 12 tournament.
Absolutely. Let's check in on this final weekend series of the show. Oklahoma State goes to Lubbock, sweeps Texas Tech. Texas Tech's just in an awful way right now. Not only is the pitching still pretty bad, but the hitting at times has almost completely abandoned them as well. Um, Low vibes, low oxygen, as Mike Rooney would say, out in Lubbock right now. Just not a good situation. On the other hand, Oklahoma State doesn't seem to matter what pitcher is or is not available for them at this point. Like Mario Pesca did not pitch this weekend. Noah Wett came back after an extended absence. Hudson Barrett was back again after pitching last week in a closer role. We debated a little bit like what his role would actually be moving forward. And the Pokes just get it done. Yes, Texas Tech is pretty bad and down right now, but this was a weekend that Oklahoma State needed to have, and they went and got it.
Needed to have is exactly the terminology there. Daniel Allen, who does a great job with Oklahoma State, was quizzing me left and right when I was in Stillwater. He said, "Well, what if we go down to Lubbock and do this and things of that nature?" And pump the brakes. You're good. You just got to find a way to win on the road, and that's exactly what happened this weekend. Because that's really been the conversation around Stillwater is these guys play one way at home and another way on the road, and it is still Texas Tech. It is still a launching pad where I think Jamie, you and I could hit a couple home runs in the course of a 9-inning game down in Lubbock. But Aiden Miola certainly contributed to that. 6 RBIs on Friday. Colin Ritchie had another big game. But then Brennan Phillips on the mound on Sunday. That's a stretching out of the rotation if I've ever seen it. Is you talk about a guy that I don't think we've mentioned too many times on the Flyover League in our 14 or 15 or however many episodes we're in right now. 8 innings pitched for Phillips, 6 strikeouts against a Texas Tech team that knows how to hit the ball at home, usually. Obviously struggling a little bit right now. But either way, that's huge for them because that's a bullpen that can't exactly be pressed right now. Several injuries lingering. You mentioned Noah Wett coming back. Hudson Barrett, that's one of the better starters in the Big 12 this season, who's now a closer / reliever. He got the win on Saturday. Interested to see how roles continue to navigate for the Oklahoma State pitching staff. It feels a lot like it did last season, where they kind of limp into the Big 12 tournament, but at the same time, they're a team you don't want to face, and maybe they're a scary team in the NCAA tournament. You think last year they went out to Athens, Georgia, and they eliminated the Bulldogs with a crazy walk-off. Was that Brock Thompson on the walk-off, question mark?
I believe so, yeah.
Who, again, is a really fun player. I'll shout him out every time I can. I love Brock Thompson, but either way, the Pokes needed it, like you said, and they got it.
And of note, too, I think what made this series interesting for me is these are the 2 longest tenured head coaches in the Big 12 at this point. And so Josh Holliday picked up his 500th win of his career this weekend. Congratulations to him. That's a massive accomplishment. But it's also, gives you the opportunity to kind of put these 2 programs in contrast right now, because Oklahoma State has been able to adapt and overcome with the same head coach. Texas Tech has less so had the ability to do that with Tim Tadlock. And I think both are really good ball coaches. Both have different philosophies about how to build a team, how to fund a team, do all this other kinds of stuff. And so you can get to the point where if you're looking at this weekend, it can almost serve as like a microcosm of how these programs are handling the new era of college athletics and which methodology has the ability to be more successful.
Supposedly, Tim Tadlock has made comments in the last week or so about being more open to NIL in the future. Now, is that a save your own skin comment, or is that a all right, I'm awake now, let's figure it out comment for a guy that's been to, I think, 3 College World Series, won his fair share of Big 12 championships in the regular season? What does that look like for Tadlock? What do those comments actually mean? Because there's certainly conversation about who might be coaching in Lubbock next year, whether it's Tadlock or somebody else, and that could mean 2 jobs open in the state of Texas, and there you are, right in the middle of it, Jamie.
There we are, right in the middle of it. I'm gonna have to go look up those comments because just a little teaser.
I couldn't find them, but I just saw
I'm
people talking about them.
well, I'll have to reach out to a couple folks because I've got an article running tomorrow on Base 12 about what is the actual solution for Texas Tech baseball. And it is not a fire Tim Tadlock post. It is not a just, hey, you just got to write the check post, but we're actually going to take a look at kind of the nuance of the situation in the context of the rest of Texas Tech athletics. So that's a little tease there. But this isn't a Base 12 podcast. This is the Flyover League, and we still need to turn our attention to the midweek games and the weekend matchups. So, Noah, tell me, what midweek games are you most... Actually, before we get into what you're most looking forward to, let's talk about what you're not going to get to see. And that's Texas Tech, Oklahoma, canceled their midweek game up in Frisco. Potential RPI cancellation. I know that there's weather in DFW this week because I live here. But Texas Tech's RPI is in the 150s. Can Oklahoma afford to play that game? Hey, we saw some gray clouds. Maybe let's just get out of here.
It is RPI canceling season. It is springing up everywhere. It's kind of like tornado season. We're an RPI watch per se, but not an RPI warning. Who knows what the weather's like? You are in the area more than I, but I would suspect that there's going to be more inclement weather popping up all over the country as midweeks come to an end here. I was just saying about 45 minutes ago that if I'm Kansas, I'm wondering why are we going to Wichita? It's only going to hurt our RPI. That's a reality of the system. I don't blame teams too much for recognizing the flaw in the system and saying, why would we sign up to be flawed?
And at the same time, why would you even schedule that game in the first place? That's, I guess, my
you
question.
never know. You never know what
you never know.
Maybe Wichita State's leading their
True.
conference. Who
Yeah,
knows?
true. That's on me. So which midweek games are you looking forward to seeing?
I will be in attendance for K-State at Nebraska because I didn't get enough of the Wildcats on Saturday. Nebraska's a really good team, but they've struggled at midweeks against top-tier competition. They're 0-2 against Kansas, but they've beaten pretty much everybody else in the midweek slate, and they've looked really good in Big Ten play outside of that Oregon series. Not to get too in the weeds on the Big Ten here, but that'll be a fun one because K-State needs it and Nebraska needs it for their hosting potential bid, which also impacts Kansas. So it's a whole 3 focal point of view one, and then West Virginia and Penn State always gets me because you know what I'm going to mention, the promotion. It's hot dog night in Happy Valley. Penn State seems to cancel midweeks for, again, inclement weather or inclement RPI, but they're so out of the tournament picture that who knows, maybe West Virginia will make the call. But either way, if that game is played, dollar hot dogs at Penn State should be about 10,000 of them sold.
Speaking of hot dogs, and I was remiss not to mention this earlier, sitting in the press box in Fort Worth on Sunday afternoon, felt a tap on my shoulder, really more like a bear paw on my shoulder, and I turn around and there's Micah Butel out of the blue coming down from Manhattan on his way back home in the southern region of Texas to just hang out for the day and watch a little TCU Houston baseball. Decided to participate in the tradition that we have in the TCU press box, which is eat as many dollar dogs as possible and keep track all season and make a foil ball out of all the hot dog foil. Good old Micah gave us 13 dogs in 7 innings of baseball on Sunday. It was incredible. It was a miraculous feat to watch. He, I believe, starting at dog 10, would dress it and then stand up and walk a lap around the stadium as he ate it. So he made 3 or 4 solid laps around Lupton while he was just putting these dogs down. And just what a team player. What a great inning of relief we got from Micah. Phenomenal dude. Loved talking ball with him all day. And man, he threw down some dogs on Sunday in Lupton.
That's a guy who had to drive back to Beaumont, Texas after the game. So this wasn't go home to your house in Fort Worth. This was driving the car for, was that 6 hours or more on the way back to
Five-ish, yeah,
Beaumont?
five and a
Okay.
half,
All
yeah.
right. Stop for gas and food, 6 hours. And I know that my stomach wouldn't be able to handle it. We can get into whatever I have undiagnosed maybe going on down there later, but I'll get a colonoscopy in 40 years and find out then. But either way, I can't handle more than about 3 hot dogs. So I don't know how Micah does this. I think it's a publicity stunt at some point where this guy does the 9 by 9 with like root beer like twice a week. It's kind of just a ruse at this point. I'm gonna have to get to the bottom of it.
Well, I watched him eat all 13 dogs, so there's no doubt that he ate them all. And we did also, to kind of put a bow on this, map out the 3 Buc-ee's between Fort Worth and his house to make sure that he knew exactly where he could stop for a clean bathroom and touch the bronze beaver that you so neglected on the
Yeah.
way home
I,
from
I
him on
wonder if
Sunday
Quick
evening.
Trip was open on the way back as well.
Probably. Hey, our sponsorship doors are open, so if Buc-ee's or Quick Trip want to come through, just holler.
Or Phillips 66, the official gas of the Big 12.
This is true. The official gas station of the Big 12. I think there's one near me somewhere. Can't be too sure. If they were a sponsor, I'd know where every single one was on the planet.
I have a back tattoo of the Phillips 66 locations.
I'm going to hold you to that when Phillips 66 eventually sponsors the Flyover League.
Right.
Matching tramp stamps of the Phillips 66 logo. I'm looking forward to Stetson at UCF. I think that's going to be a really fun baseball game. And then I'll be at UTA coming to Fort Worth. UTA absolutely whipped the crap out of TCU on the 4th game of the season in Globe Life Field. So this is kind of an opportunity for TCU to get their licks back. I think they're in a much better spot mentally than they were going into that game against UTA the first time. So we'll be interested to see how the Horned Frogs and the Mavericks game shakes out. Going into the weekend, though, Noah, we have 7 really exciting matchups across the league. We've got Utah at BYU, the baseball version of the Holy War. We have Arizona State traveling to UCF. We have Kansas State at West Virginia, Arizona at Kansas, TCU at Oklahoma State, Texas Tech at Baylor, and Cincinnati at Houston. Which of those are you keeping your biggest eye on, and what are some other intriguing matchups from your perspective?
Yeah, Jamie, the one that stands out to me the most is kind of ironic. Kansas State and West Virginia. I don't know why that one grabbed me immediately. I just think of two teams that are kind of heading in similar directions, but at different paces, where West Virginia needs to rebound to maybe get back into that hosting conversation, and then K State needs to rebound to get back into the NCAA tournament conversation. Both those teams, when they play their best baseball, are really, really good and are capable of going as far as they want to, as far as I'm concerned. With West Virginia's ceiling maybe a little bit higher, but that's a fun one to me. And then, kind of in a similar vein, Texas Tech at Baylor. Is Baylor going to fight back? Now that's still Texas Tech, where it's you're not putting your hat in and saying we beat Texas Tech, but you've got to figure it out if you're Baylor, and that's a good soft landing to do so. I'm sure there's more exciting games for NCAA tournament conversations, but for whatever reason, those two both grabbed me for their potential context of the league.
Look, I'm staring that Arizona State UCF series dead in the face because
Yeah.
these are the 2 teams that are tied for second in the Big 12. They're both 3 games behind Kansas, and Kansas is bringing Arizona to town. So you have to assume, I think, if you're Arizona State and UCF, that you need all 3 of these games just to keep pace with the Jayhawks if you want a chance of overcoming them for the regular season title. So I think we're going to see some absolute haymakers. We're going to see Willie Bloomquist and Dan Fitzgerald pull out all of the, or sorry, Rich Wallace pull out all of the stops this weekend to try and get all of these games. I think from the rip on Friday, it's going to be an extraordinarily competitive series that I'm very much looking forward to. And I have no earthly idea who I'm going to pick in the pick'em. Even when I run the model, I'm not sure I'm going to know who I'm going to pick in the pick'em in that series this week. And then I'm interested in TCU and Oklahoma State. These are 2 teams, like we've said, have kind of fought through a bunch of adversity this season. And Oklahoma State just got a big win on the road. TCU just took care of business at home. They've been a pretty decent road team this year in conference play when you think about their series wins at Baylor and at Kansas State. So can Oklahoma State protect home field? Can TCU sneak a couple wins out of there and maybe climb up the standings a little bit more? Those are the two series that I'm really paying attention to this weekend.
Yeah, good picks at the top of the league. Mine were a little bit more intellectual. You took the low-hanging fruit,
That's
but
fair.
I like the picks either way. And like you alluded to, it's going to be another tough week in the pick'em. Last week was very tough. Some are saying the toughest week in the league, where you had to be really smart to get them all right, or something like that. But I was able to go 7-0. I don't know if you knew that.
I did know that. And I'm going to screenshot the message I sent the group a couple weeks ago where I said, when do we start to stage Noah's late season comeback, so that everyone just thinks that this is all scripted and that you're not actually smart.
Yeah.
At all.
I think the best part of it was when we called up West Virginia and say, hey, you guys got to blow this one. You guys got to go down right now. And Cincinnati was able to come back. So that was well played by you to stage that.
Yeah, you're welcome for picking West Virginia just to make it less obvious that we've scripted this whole thing.
Yep.
Also picking Utah was my sacrifice this weekend as well. Awesome. That's going to do it, though, I think, for this episode of the Flyover League. Thank you for everybody who's listened to this point. Don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or over on the YouTube channel. Oh, and shout out to the Kansas radio broadcast for throwing our Jayhawks interview with Dan Fitzgerald on the air during that massive rain delay on Sunday. Masterful work. Love that they did that. Absolutely welcome to do it anytime they want. Throw our stuff up on their radio station. But until then, we're looking forward to another great week of Big 12 baseball, and we'll be back next week to talk about it all. Until then.